These are the pointers for our exam. Economic globalization, economic impact of globalization, importance of free trade, advantages of globalizations in the Philippines, and so forth. So this is the continuation of the pointers. So all the coverage of the pointers is here in our slides. So we'll discuss the meanings of globalization. Globalization, from our previous discussion during the midterm, is related in the cultural aspect. So globalization here is the blending of cultures. So the cultures from Europe, the Northern America, and other parts of the world through globalization could blend through other parts of the world through Christian missionaries and colonization, and lately through the television shows that are being broadcast by the programs like Netflix, the Korean shows that we see. So it influence us and possibly results into the blending of cultures. Also is the globalization in technology. So like globalization is the movement of goods, information, culture, so it also includes the movements in technology. So the primary contributor to globalization in terms of technology is the internet. But it also not only limited to technologically, because it also includes in the cultural exchanges, because right now we also use technology in our Zoom meetings, chat, and other online multimedia needs. So the spread of information through internet, so internet is like the breakthrough discovery in terms of technology that allows this very big world to feel very small because of that interconnectedness, and the information can just be clicked in just one type through our phones. We can search through Google any information that we like to know, even if you're like not feeling well or confused in a particular topic. You can just get your phone and search it through Google. So it is the, along with it is also the improvement in cell phones. Before, computers are very expensive, but through the improvements of advancement of the technology in cell phones, we can use it not only for communication but also for information, and it is less expensive as compared before, where we need the connectivity of those wires, whereas in cell phones through satellite we can all be connected to each other. So around 60% of all people in the world use cell phones. So it allows people all over the world to be connected like never before. So in a particular topic in the finals, it is more focused on economics. Then on the latter part, on politics. But we failed to reach now the topic on politics, so more of our discussions was limited to globalization in economics. So the globalization in economics revolves on the various multinational corporations. So they have a mother corporation located in America or the developed country, and through outsourcing, they have various uh, corporations or branches, satellite offices in different locations. So, outsourcing can add to economic development of a struggling country. So, it can bring employment to the developing country, which needed jobs. Some automobiles use other parts from other countries. So, although it is a Japanese company or American company, different parts are being assembled from different places. It can be assembled in the United States with parts coming from Japan, which are known for their reliability, Germany, or Korea. So one product, like one shirt sold in the United States, could have been made from the Chinese cotton. So the Chinese are known for their silk or their cotton, and that particular shirt has been produced, or the factory where they made it is located in Thailand. So it involves many different countries. So it was sold in the United States, but the component or product raw materials used is from China, and the workers and the production is located in Thailand. So globalization is often divided into three categories. So like the first part, economic, like our topic for the finals, political and social. So political is also our topic for the finals, and social, which have been our topic in the previous midterm. So this we have also discussed this. These are the impacts economically. So economic impact of globalization results in the improvement of standards of living of a particular country. So even in developed countries, when globalization reaches them, it results in improvement in the standard of living of people when they have been given opportunity for employment. So it brings convenience, and they can afford more things. It also increased competition among the nations, which result to a better product. Although there is a negative effect here, the widening income gap between the rich and the poor. So it is still not being resolved. Why, in spite of globalization, the gap between the poor and the rich is still widening. So other impacts here includes the social impact. So it is the result of globalization socially. So positively, it increased of our awareness of other cultures. So we have become it it developed in us a sense of respect to other cultures, even in spite of their difference. We have learned to respect them. But the negative part is the loss of local culture. So some of us have forgotten our original culture and adopted some of those foreign cultures that we saw through multimedia or through our different travels abroad. And the last part is also an economic impact because environmental degradation results in our continuous utilization of the environment for development, and which also leads to environmental management, which is the solution on how we can sustain our environment for the future generations. So, importance of free trade. So the importance of free trade has been the free trade have always been emphasized by those developed nations and international organizations as the solution for developing countries to also progress. So free trade is that where a country does not levy taxes. So instead of that usual when a particular product enters our country, we levy a particular tax to it. So, uh, opposite to this, the concept of free trade is we allow goods from other countries to come into our country without any imposition of taxes. So, it comes in its original price. So, free trade is the policy in which a country does not levy taxes, additional duties, subsidies, quota, or limit on the import export of goods or services from other countries. So, it is the idea of those developing countries, highly developed countries, or international organizations that through this free exchange of goods and services, every country will flourish. So there are countries who have resolved to free trade in their specific regions, but some, although this was being suggested by those international organizations, the cost of free trade is sometimes detrimental to our local producers. When there are excessive influx of imported products to our country, it will affect our own local products. Maybe they cannot compete, or our locals wouldn't consume our national or domestic products anymore. So it will affect our economy. So advantage of globalization includes peaceful relations with other country. So in promoting trade, we resort to peaceful relations. It provides employment opportunities. It also results in the advancement in education. There is an opportunity for us to enroll in those very high standard or internationally standard education or schools because of globalization. Is already accessible. Sometimes we don't have to go to other countries or abroad. Even in Zamboanga, there are already many international schools. So it is a very critical advantage that aided the population, the spread of education. Many numerous educational institutions around the globe. And if we have the financial means, we can also move out from our home country and have our education abroad. We are not restricted. So the improvement of product quality comes with competition and cheaper prices because of the industries of scale. So it's also an advantage of globalization, the the improvement in communication brought out by the internet and other improvement in technology in smartphones. Transportation have also improved. It is now more accessible, less expensive, and safe. Gross domestic product also increased because of globalization, because it allows our product to be imported to other countries. Travel and tourism is also encouraged because many tourists from different parts of the world visits the country, so they are interested in our country. There are many beaches, there are many mountains, so because of globalization, it it promotes tourism and it provides various employment opportunities to our fellow citizens, or like in countries where tourism are highly promoted, so many pasalubong or other mga delicacies are available. So many purchases for pasalubong. They have encouraged tourist spots or other souvenir shops. So those kind of products are very lucrative there. Many are patronizing souvenir products in those tourism parts of the country. Unlike like here in Zamboanga, our tourism is somewhat low, so even if we resort in that kind of product, the souvenir shops dress, so it is not very profitable. Unlike in Cebu or Davao, even pasalubong shops are very lucrative endeavors. So disadvantages of globalization includes health issues. The spread of diseases are also more easily, like in the event of coronavirus. It has affected us all. Loss of culture. Some people lost their culture and adapt the culture of the foreign country they have traveled to. Uneven wealth distribution. Some countries are only getting richer, whereas other countries seems to just cannot recover economically. Environmental degradation. Our environment, our problem with our ozone layer seems have gotten worse because of the industrial revolution. The constant smoke coming from our factories are destroying the environment. So activities like mining, drilling puts a burden on the environment. There's also a problem in disparity. So what works for other country doesn't necessarily will also work with our country. So there is a disparity in the development of the economies. There is structural unemployment, and developed countries are moving their factories to foreign countries where labor is cheaply available. Also, a negative effect of globalization is conflicts that give rise to terrorism and forms of violence. So this is more of like in the culturally related violence when other when other countries or religions don't accept the effect of any aggressive religion trying to absorb or change their beliefs and cultures. While in the cutthroat competitions, this is a negative disadvantage of economic globalization through the international trade. There are many various companies, so if you are somewhat short of capital, it is hard to survive in the competition. So this gave birth to intense competition. It has affected the local markets dramatically. So if the local markets are not protected by the government, they have the risk of bankruptcy. They cannot survive on their own. So globalization can also result in unemployment in industrialized countries because the firm where they were supposed to work in transfer the production facilities or factories to other developing countries to have cheaper workers. So instead of having the factories there in their home country, they transfer it to the developing country, which results to loss of jobs. So international trade is that exchange of goods and services between countries. So economic globalization refers to the free movement of goods like the products, then capital, services, technology, and information. So this is the definition of global economics. Economic globalization refers to the free movement of goods, capital, services, technology, and information. But not only this, it also means an increased integration economically. So integration meaning there is an increased relationship, integration, like they have been combined, and interdependence is like meaning you are reliant or being dependent to other nations. So there is an integration and interdependence between national, regional, and local economies across the world through an intensification of cross-border movements of goods. So this intensification of exchanges of import and export, services, technology, and capital, it's like we have become more independent and reliant with each other. So we need each other to survive. If one particular component or one country suffers, we also feel its effect. So like the war in Ukraine, when there was a problem on their part, so we also feel across the globe the effect of their problem in terms of the supply of oil and the increase of prices of other relevant commodities. So here it is shown the Bretton Woods Conference, which have been made after the World War II, which seeks to solve the which seeks to help those, those countries recover from the effects of the World War. Because after the World Wars, it seems that different countries try to survive independently. So through this Bretton Woods Conference, it encouraged free trade between the countries, so they should help each other and not only try to recover independently. So the goals of the conference intended to govern currency regulations and establish legal obligations, set a standard for exchange rates. So since they want to establish trade between the countries, this will be more efficient if they will set a standard for exchange rates between the countries. So not only would they encourage free trade now with no importation of taxes between the goods, but they started the exchange of, like for example, the value of dollar and a peso and so forth with other countries to better facilitate trade. To avoid confusion, so establish international monetary cooperation. In here they made sure that the central banks of that particular country would accept the money of the other country. So like our peso, they made sure that the country of China will accept our money or currency, and they will refuse, like they will declare that the Philippine money has no value. And the establishment of like international organizations like IMF and World Bank, where member nations can borrow funds. So here the World Bank Group and International Monetary Fund. Although in spite of their advocate of their noble advocate, they are still being criticized. They are being severely criticized for some because of their policies. Because they have this one size fits all policy, like in the concept of free trade. If they will allow free trade in all countries, they assume that they will have the similar effect of positive progress. So like when other developing countries tried this economic policy, they seem to have reached a different outcome. So like the country of Argentina, when they opened their country to various international products and businesses, it seems to have not resulted in the expected outcome of progress, but instead it have resulted to more economic downfall and crisis on their country. So it seems their one size fits all approach is not guaranteed to work to every country at all situations. So World Bank, it is also a financial institution that provides loans to countries all over the world for capital projects. So the difference between the IMF, the World Bank provide loans to different countries for capital projects. If you have investiture projects for your country, like the Build program of the Philippines. So for long-term approach, you want to construct new educational facilities or hospitals, you can apply for World Bank for these capital projects. So it was established by the United Nations Monetary and Financial Conference, or the Bretton Woods Conference. So the International Monetary Fund also serves as a lending institution, but it is on to ensure the stability of the international monetary system. So it also provides financial capital or loans, but for emergency reasons, like when a country faces a particular calamity or suddenly there's a war, a breakout of war or epidemic, so the International Monetary Fund can provide loans as a matter of last resort. So it does so in three ways: keeping track of the global economy. So the International Monetary Fund always keeps tracks of the global economy. So it has this magazine, the International Monetary Fund magazine, where it updates all the global economy of different countries and all its member countries. So it lends countries with balance of payments difficulties and giving practical help to members like support and other assistance. So World Trade Organization is that organization that regulates the international trades between countries. So for order between the trade relations and activities within the countries, the World Trade Organization is that international organization that provides the policies, provides control, and deals with the rule of trade between nations. So the World Trade Organization ensures that trade flows smoothly between the different countries, and if there are certain conflicts and issues, it acts as the forum for negotiation and trade agreements between the countries. So there are various benefits of the World Trade Organization. First, it solves trade disputes between different countries who have somehow conflicts between their trade relations or possible trade transactions, but somehow it has its drawbacks. According to this, there is somehow a bias between the with the World Trade Organization, that it only focuses on the developed nations, meaning those rich, powerful nations like the America. Another positive benefit it lowers the cost of goods and services for those developed nations. So when there are certain trade disputes or negotiations, so it allows or declares lower cost of goods and services for those developed nations. It lowers the cost of goods and services for those developed nations. But on the negative, to achieve this lower cost, labor rights and environmental concerns are sometimes ignored. So to achieve cheap labor, although on the other hand, labor rights, the rights of the workers, or certain environmental safety or standards are ignored. So it also promotes economic growth in developed countries, but somehow on its drawback, accordingly, it shows again its bias that the World Trade Organization favor the rich nations and powerful transnational corporations. So World Health Organization, they are also the organization in charge of the health of all the people. So it concerns about the public health, and its main task is the eradication of various diseases like AIDS and HIV, and lately the coronavirus. So forces surrounding the global system of production, the national government, and enabling technologies. So in here, it has also been discussed by the reporters So the United Nations, the international organization, has these 8 Millennium Development Goals. So the United Nations seeks or wants to address the different problems of the world. So it wants to solve the different problems, common problems that have been existing in different countries across the world. So among these 8 goals that they seem that all people are suffering are: first, the eradication of extreme poverty and hunger rank as first. So they want to seek poverty, but here their goal is not the ordinary poverty level, but that extreme poverty where it leads to the total deprivation of basic needs. So it not only meant the poor people, but those people who are totally deprived of basic needs like food, water, and other basic needs. So like the one we see in India or Africa, like those malnourished children or people that were totally deprived of nutrients for basic sustenance. So achieving universal primary education, so this for the improvement of accessibility of education, especially for the poor. So like what we often heard, education is the key or answer to poverty and progress, promoting gender equality and women empowerment to avoid the discrimination towards the sex or the woman. So equality between the capability of men and women, reducing child mortality. In other poor countries, many children die because of health facilities that are lacking. Also improving maternal health for the welfare of the child and the mother, combating diseases like HIV, AIDS, malaria, and other uh, and this recent epidemic, the COVID-19, ensuring environment sustainability, that there will be enough resources for the future generations to come, global partnership for development among nations, so there to support other nations who are not wealthy. It encouraged global partnership to be able to raise or allow other developing countries to grow. So these are the 8 Millennium Goals of the United Nations. Although it is difficult, accordingly, there are progress, there are positive results. So this is the definition of extreme poverty according to the UN. Some are totally deprived of the basic needs of food, safe drinking water, sanitation facilities, health, shelter, education, and information. So accordingly, from UN, extreme poverty is already falling, so there is already improvement. And the answer to this question is that there has been improvement in the accessibility of education. Many poor people are now having better opportunities to education. Even indigenous people have already access to education as compared to before. Many humanitarian aid are reaching its intended outcomes, intended people, and the policies of international organizations like UN So their policies have made a difference. And the most important factor is economic globalization. So accordingly, aside from all those previously enumerated, the most important factor is economic globalization that resulted to the extreme poverty falling. So the interconnection and free trading has driven the growth of many developing countries. So this interconnection, interdependence, integration of economies and free trades between the different countries have resulted to many growth in developing nations and economies. So, according to the United Nations, economic globalization refers to the increasing interdependence. So, they are the dependence of world economies as a result of the growing scale of cross-border trade of commodities and services. So, the trade between different countries have become intense. So, they have been interdependent or already have been dependent to this continuous cross-border trade between different countries. So the flow of international capital to the developing country is also very important. Like as Filipinos, the flow of international capital, even from our OFWs, have been very beneficial to our countries. Wide and rapid spread of technologies have also been beneficial. The coming of the multinational corporation have resulted in various technologies that have been made available to us. And these technologies allowed for more industries of scale in terms of production. So, economies that is associated with globalization. So, protectionism is that system whereby the government intervenes in the foreign trade. So, in here, the government tries to protect its domestic production, its domestic workers, or the locals. It involves in giving preferential treatment to domestic producers and discriminating against foreign competitors. So in protectionism, the government imposed higher taxes towards the products of the importers, uh, towards the product of those other countries coming into our country. And if ever it put quotas, so like the amount of swine products that will be able to come into a country, it sets only a certain quota or limit. So, given our national fondness towards pork, and maybe our local workers cannot sufficiently provide for that need, so exports we allow exports from other countries of swine products, but to a certain limit. So we put a quota to it. We use two system, like we either put additional taxes to it, and or we set a limit to the number of products or that can enter into our country. So this is the concept of protectionism. So they usually comes in forms of quotas and tariffs. So tariffs are required fees on imports and exports. So they are taxes that we add on to the imports or exports of products. So countries like Japan, China, and United States, although they are highly developed, although like the United States are highly developed countries, still are practicing protectionism. So trade liberalization is the free trade agreements between trade agreements and technological advances in transportation and communications. Goods and services can move around the world easily than ever. So trade liberalization is the opposite of protectionism, whereby goods and services can move freely around the world, whereas protectionism, there is a barrier, there is a limit in the form of quotas and tariffs. So fair trade is an important concept in globalization because it allows protection, or it combats unfair trading. So this will help developing countries in lessening those inequalities suffered. So fair trade, as defined by International Fair Trade Association, is the concern for the social, economic, and environmental well-being of the marginalized small producers. So it provides that concern for the marginalized small producers. As compared to before, the marginalized small producers were always, it seems, at the losing end, where in the concept of fair trade they have been given concern. So fair trade is typically concerned for the protections of workers and the producers of raw materials, and establishment of more just prices. So in terms of transactions, agreements, or trade particular trade exchanges, so it must be in a particular, equitable, and just prices. Not only this, fair trade also is concerned with the engagement in environmentally sound practices, so that we can also preserve our environment, and sustainable production. So sustainable production, we won't totally harvest everything. So there is unsustainable, there is management allocation. So another here is the creation of relationships between producers in the south and consumers in the north. So it's like a partnership. So the south the south have been the developing countries, and the north are the highly developed countries. So is to establish the relationships between these two, it's like a partnership. So partnership relations between the producers and the consumers, and like the World Trade Organization, to make sure that there is a fair and equitable relationship between the two in terms of just prices, in terms of protection to the workers. So like in this scenario, the workers could be the people from the south, and or the sellers and the producers could be the people from the south, and the consumers are the one countries from the north. Then the last is the protection, promotion of safe working environment for the workers. So sometimes for for the notion of profit or economic gain, some countries turn a blind eye to the protection of their workers. Some of their workers work at a poor and hazardous working environment. Sometimes it is dangerous to their health, toxic, or if ever they are near to hazardous materials that are unsafe to their health and lives. So through this concept of unfair trading, it seeks to eliminate those unfair and wrong practices. So do you think that the Philippines is harmed as other countries transfer their activities to us through outsourcing? So if the government won't intervene and uh, practice our labor laws that will protect our workers and our environmental laws that will protect our environment from those hazardous waste materials, then it can compensate the positive effects that the employment, the outsourcing activity that will give to us. So the coming of those multinational corporations, their branches that will provide employment to our citizens here and would allow technological transfer, provide additional services, products in our country. From its first effect, it is on a positive note. Like we see it provides employment, it gives us a better high opportunity for comfort, convenience, standard of living. So it will only harm us if our government will not protect our local works. So it just need to balance the negative and positive effect. In what ways do international organizations help our country's economy? So our international organizations provide various help and support to our economy, not only financially but also in advices and providing those seminars, technological know-hows. Sometimes they have a representative and they will educate us on the certain aspects in economy on how we can improve it. So not only economy, there is also like when we see the millennial goals of international organizations. So in all those 8 aspects, the international organizations can help us. So it can help us in their first one in elevation of poverty. So they can provide aid in support materials. They can donate various clothings. They can help in our water facility. They can help in our improvement of our hospital. They can provide fundings in our education. They can provide teachers. They can provide books. So there are various aid that internationals can do to help our country. Does the position of rich countries as giants in the economic chain threaten the status of less developed countries in the global market? Even if we are not threatened, the integration of various countries because of globalization have results in the effect that if the economy of the United States or Europe and other Middle East countries will suffer, then our status will economically will also be affected. So like in US, if the country of US will go down or other Middle Eastern countries will suffer, so it will reach even up to us the effect economically. So it will result to either the prices, the extreme increase in the prices of oil and other related important commodities, essential commodities. So it will definitely threaten us if the status of those rich countries in the economic chain will somehow go down. So economic globalization and sustainable development. So So sustainable development refers to the development of the world today by using the earth's resources. So our development economically today has been available because of our use of the earth's resources. So sustainable development and the preservation of such resources for the future. But we still need to preserve our resources for the future. So if we totally utilize our resources now at the present without totally being concerned on our resources to be sustained in the future, then what will be the future of our future generations? So in other words, development has to be ensured in also for the future generations. So we also must be mindful to the future generations and not only think about how we can gain and totally utilize our current resources for our development. So sustainable development is one significant response or approach to economic globalization. So in spite of this continuous progress of economic globalization, many buildings are being put up, the speed of production of various high machineries converting products in matter of seconds, in converting raw materials into finished products in a matter of seconds. So in spite of this possibility of multiple profits, so we still must be mindful of our future generations. So in here, in sustainable development, we seek to chart a middle ground between economic growth and sustainable environment. So this is the middle part. No matter how we want to fully utilize or grow economically, we still have to sustain ourselves or to stop ourselves and be mindful to our environment. So the continuous production of the world's natural resources such as water, fossil fuel allows the humanity to the discovery of uh, various things that allowed us to innovate many things. So utilizing this energy allows us to discover many technologies, and this advancement provides us comfort uh, and higher standard of living. So the advancement in transportation, communication have resulted to better standard of living for us. But although in spite of all the positive effects we have experienced of this various development, there is the negative effect that it put to our environment. So this development put our environment at a disadvantage. So with the climate change accelerating and global inequality remains evident. So the effect of this development is that the climate change is continuously accelerating. Thus, therefore, development, although beneficial at one hand, entails cost on the other. So it is not all positive. Although there are various benefits to development, there is a negative effect and cost to our environment. So our industrial revolution that have resulted to efficiency in production have impacted economic development, and this period human history made possible the cycle of efficiency. So we are very efficient in our production. So the quickest possible way of producing large amount of a particular product. So if before we can only make a 10 product using old methods or manual labor, through the use of machinery we can produce 1,000 of that particular product. So through the cycle, through this industrial revolution, we have become so efficient in terms of production, and it results to profitability. So the process of transaction was made easier for people, and there is the increased demand, and ultimately there was an increased efficiency. But the negative effect is on our environment, so such as the harming the planet by more carbon emissions from the factories. So it also results to the destruction of our coral reefs, marine diversity, as more waste are being thrown into the ocean. So this is the opposite or the negative effect of efficiency, or destruction of our environment. The continuous improvement in the standard of living of our people endangered our Earth's sustainable condition. So with our growing continuous economy, it have resulted to a continuous deforestation, pollution, climate change. So we must be aware. So sometimes we have this reach this limit in our cycle, in our efficiency. So sometimes it maybe it is only not for sustainable production for our future generations, but even for us. So the result of climate change has been for us that further destruction of our environment will result to catastrophic results in our environment. So there are environmentalists who seeks to resolve or prevent the destruction of our environment, but somehow there are highly economic countries that are influential and will oppose this, like this Kyoto Protocol, which aimed at reducing the global carbon emissions from factories, which could have made a significant impact but failed to materialize because it was not materialized by the United States. So being the United States being a very like a majority stakeholder in a particular corporation, did not ratify this particular protocol by all countries that seeks to reduce the global carbon emissions emitted by the factories, and also to deal with environmental problems such as the carbon tax and carbon neutrality were undertaken. So it added additional tax to carbon, but it seems to this have not been very effective. In using also alternatives to fossil fuel, it was not also very effective because the use of ethanol as a substitute for fossil fuel has also not been effective, because the use of ethanol as an alternative for gasoline has led to the increase in the prices of corn, as it serves the main source of ethanol. So, and other technological fixes like engineering. Accordingly, also, food security by the year 2050 would also become a problem. So, as our population would increase and probably underestimate, like it would be become 9 billion people, Our food requirement by the year 2050 would be 60% higher. So it will become a real problem if this need will not be met. So lack of availability of food to supply to us all would mean that we will be all driven to poverty or malnutrition, as we will all suffer to find even the basic food for our survival. So the security of food also means the sustainability of society, such as population growth, so our continuous population growth, the continuous change in the climate, water scarcity, and agriculture. So in here, it is in the example where although India is 50% involved in agriculture, it is still suffering from malnutrition. So environment having a close association with food security is facing the challenges which can be traced to the protection of the environment. So more environmental problem is the destruction of natural habitats, particularly through deforestation. So food security is, if ever, related to agriculture. We should encourage more agriculture. So more, although we have more buildings, more technologies, if we continuously neglect our agriculture, then by then we may really have a problem in our food security. So in here, industrial fishing has also contributed to significant destruction of marine life and ecosystem. So even if the fishes are not still ready for harvest, they are already being taken. So biodiversity of this marine life and usable farmlands have decreased at a very rapid pace. So even the alkalinity of fresh water have also declined as a result of salt degradation or desertification. So sometime maybe later on we will face a climate refugees where people would be forced to migrate due to lack of access to water or due to flooding. So although it is a basic need or to be available to us all, some of us may have a problem of accessing the basic need of water due to problem to water supply. So like now, some of us have already experiencing rationing of water. Some have very low supply of water in their areas. So what more to other countries that will be having a more worse problem of water, which is very important to us all. Or in the opposite, some place or locations would experience flooding. So like in our previous experience, we have already encountered experience that even in minor even if normal rains as we have experienced before, we have already experienced sudden flooding. So pollutions through toxic chemicals have long-term impacts on the environment. So maybe that's why even the use of cellophane we have limit ourselves to using that, as it can destroy our environment. So we are adopting policies that can help or be environment friendly in our own little ways, because these greenhouse gases that trap sunlight in the earth heat atmosphere, if taken for granted, and would result to that global warming at their extreme, and would probably cause a very catastrophic effect of, like in here, the melting of the glacial ice of those other parts of the world would potentially result to catastrophic effects. So like extreme flooding, substantial flooding, reduced alkalinity of the oceans, and destruction of existing ecosystems. So there have been global inequality in various nations, especially the North and the South. So nations are divided between the North and the South. The North are the ones developed countries. So even in the countries like America and Europe, it is also divided between the North and the South. So even in the Americas, the people on the North America are the ones who are the richest country, and the countries located in Southern America are the poorer or developing countries. So they have been termed as such: North and South, developed and less developed, and the core and periphery. So from the word itself, the core meaning the central or important countries. So these are also the developed countries, whereas the periphery are the one in support thereof. So there are two main types of economic inequality: wealth inequality and income inequality. So from the word itself, wealth inequality refers to the total net worth of a country. So it includes all those natural assets already located in a particular country, including their natural, physical, and human. Whereas the income equality is the exchange as the result of the what they earn from their exchange, and from their exchange of products, from the imports and exports of products. While from wealth inequality, some countries have rich minerals like and deposits of rich material deposits, and like in the Middle East countries, they are wealthy because they have high contents of oil in their country. So this is wealth inequality, while income equality results in the better gain in terms of international trade exchange. So the third world and the global south. So the global south refers to the third world or the developing countries. So what is the impact of global flows on the global south? The global flows allow the global south or the developing countries to also develop or prosper economically, because global flows can be synonymous to globalization. That refers to the movement of money, goods, capital, technologies, ideas towards the global south. So if there is a movement of these goods towards your country, goods, technology, capital, so it allows also your country to develop. So you can also be able to maximize and use this technological know-how and or highly industrialized machines to improve your country. So examine the gap between rural and urban areas across the globe. How is the gap affected by globalization? So the gap is affected by globalization as rural areas have difficulty of accessibility of even electricity, internet, transportation, and other aspects of related to globalization. That's why the reach of globalization is somehow affected, whereas in urban areas, because of their better facilities in terms of transportation, communication, internet, electricity, and various avenue for the exchange of products and services, they are better equipped to take advantage of the positive effects of globalization. So what do you think is the impact of urbanization and the rise of global city on the agricultural sector? So the impact of the rise of urbanization on the agricultural sector is that this will lessen the products on the agricultural sector as more farmers will transfer their efforts towards the urban cities. So instead of farming or living in the rural areas, they will transfer it, try to find their luck in the urbanized area. Instead of farming, they will try to be a call center agent and try to savor the standard of living of those living in the cities. So if ever the result of this are agricultural sector will be taken would be on a backseat in terms of improvement. In case of the Philippines, how much do you think are we involved in the modern world system? What do you think are the advantage and disadvantage of being part of such? How can we upgrade our economy given the strength of the global economy, especially the giant economies like the United States and Japan? And how do we examine economic globalization considering our colonial history? So we are in terms of the involvement of our modern world system, we are involved in our modern systems. We have various partnerships with America and China. Our trade relations have been deeply involved in this modern world system. So advantages of such is that we have seek ourselves of various loans, partnership, technological know-how, and aids from these countries. So it is a matter of utilization on this help if we ever truly develop or prosper as an economy. So it depends upon the government if we can utilize the aid that we have from other countries or international organizations. But if the corruption will again take priority in our government and we fail to pay our loans, then the loans that we secure from the other countries will balloon, and the intended funds that we have secured from them didn't manifest in the intended project for the building of the capital projects, then our country would further go down. So how can we upgrade our economy given the strength of the global economy? So our strength was always on agriculture, and we the government should support our agricultural industry and provide the farmers with capital, technological know-how, and aids. So somehow they are struggling now, they lack capital. Further help by our government until they can stand up on their own and have the confidence to really. So it is a partnership effort between our government and our farmers to encourage them, because it may be our only key towards also at attaining sustainable development and be able to have a real product of our own that we can trade with other countries. How to examine economic globalization considering our colonial history? So because of our colonial history, we have been 300 years under the colony of Spain, then under the colony of Japan, and also the Americans. So from the very first, from our history itself, it's like we started on the negative note. So maybe this is because of our colonial history that we have started as a developing country. Only very few colonized countries have been successful. Most of the successful countries or rich countries are the ones on Europe, America. So they are the conquerors and they have been the one beneficial on these trade activities. So if we are the colonized, so it's like we are the slaves of these rich countries, and all our resources are our countrymen. They are the laborers and slave workers of these rich countries. Like in the 300 years of colonization of Spain, uh, with the Philippines, so all the resources and lands located in the Philippines belong to Spain. So there is nothing we own. All our resources are from them and all our workers belong to them. So if we started with like that of history, it may be understandable why we haven't had a good start. So market integration, from the word itself, integration is the integration of the different countries and economies that somehow the effect of the downfall of a particular of another country, we can also feel it in our country. So economic systems vary from one society to another. There are three sectors that are given understanding of an economy. So there are three sectors in an economy. So the primary sector extracts raw materials from the natural environment. So these are the farmers where they extract the raw materials. The secondary sector gains the raw materials and transform them into manufactured goods. So from raw materials, the secondary sector transforms it into a finished product. The tertiary sector involves in services rather than goods. So in the tertiary sector, these workers are selling services instead of products. So they are professionals like lawyers, doctors, consultants, teachers. So they are offering their services instead of products. So international financial institutions, like we have discussed before, these have been so they are the reasons that the world economies have been brought closer together by globalization. So these international financial institutions have brought closer together world economies by globalization. So world economies have impact on global market and finance. The strength of a more powerful economy brings greater effect on other countries. So if the country is like United States, so the strength of the powerful economy brings greater effect to the other countries. So if the United States country will go down, many will feel its effect as compared to if Argentina will suffer uh, an economic downfall, somehow we may not feel its effect in the same way as if the United States economy will go down. So in the same manner, crises on weaker economies have less effect on other countries. So like what have been previously discussed, the financial institutions that have been responsible to making those countries very close, or as from the title itself, the topic market integration. So they have been integrated and interdependent with each other. So it is the Bretton Woods system. So after the World War II, the Bretton Woods has been established because it has been observed that the various countries have no concern of the welfare of other countries, and they try to individually survive and recover from the aftermath of the World War II. So after the Bretton Woods system has been established, by with these reasons, the fear of the recurrence of lack of cooperation among the nation states. So the various nations or countries have been non-cooperating with each other. There have been political instability and economic turmoil, and if ever, they have closed all their barriers to trade. So in the Bretton Woods systems, there are five key elements. So the first element is the expression of currency in terms of gold. So the currency in terms of gold, or gold value, to establish a par value. So to be able to establish a par value, it have been expressed in terms of gold. So a particular dollar value in terms of ounce of gold, and then a peso value also in relation to an ounce of gold. So because of this, if we establish their value in terms of 1 ounce of gold, then we can have the, like in the current value, the $50 is equivalent to 1 peso. $5, $1 is equivalent to 50 pesos in terms of the value of their gold reserve. So the second element is that the central monetary authority, like the central bank, would accept the currency of a particular country. So the Japan will not refuse the Philippine peso, even if for them the Philippine peso is not very eye-catching or eye candy for their part. So they must recognize our currency. So through from this Bretton Woods system, they agree that it is mandatory for the central banks of the particular country to recognize the currency of other countries and only add a 1% margin for its profitability, like yung like the one in the exchange rate, money exchange rate. So the third element is the IMF as the overseer of this exchange rate. So the International Monetary Fund was also established as the overseer of these exchange rates. And fourth, the eliminations of restrictions on these various currencies. And five, that the recognition of the United US dollar as the global currency. So when we see the exchange rate, all other monetary value would be referred to in terms of the monetary value of dollar. So that is the global currency. So in this next international organization is the General Agreements on Tariffs and Trade. And because of these general agreements on tariffs and trades, uh, an agreement was reached to create the World Trade Organization. So based from the various multinational trade agreement and negotiations, after that, in the Uruguay round, an agreement was reached to create the World Trade Organization. So from here, the World Trade Organization, which is located in Switzerland, have 152 member states as of 2008. So if we have like 200 countries all in all, so from as early as 2008, it already have 152 member of all countries as of 2008. So the general idea where the World Trade Organization is based is that of neoliberalism. This means that by reducing or eliminating barriers, all nations will benefit. So from the first conception, it is also based on the idea, it is already based on the idea of free trade. So by reducing or eliminating barriers, all countries and nations will benefit. So the World Trade Organization has this from its conception, that only through trade liberalization or free trade will all nations prosper and benefit. So the International Monetary Fund, as has been discussed, it is one that have been it's also been founded after the World War II. So it provides loans to member countries, while the World Bank would provide loans for capital projects. The International Monetary Fund could be could help or uh, provide loans for members who are suffering from sudden devaluation of their money, or suffering from sudden downturn or economic downfall of their economy. So International Monetary Fund can be like an emergency funding institution when it can save a particular country if suddenly it faces a problem like an epidemic, a sudden downfall of its economy through war, diseases, or the likes. So it aimed to help the economic stability of the world, which was started by countries rather than regular banks. So the IMF's, or the International Monetary Fund's, main goal was to help countries which were in trouble and cannot obtain money by any means. So like their economic collapse or currency was threatened. The IMF is a lender or a last resort for countries which needed financial assistance, while the World Bank is rather on a long-term approach. So if you have a certain project or goals like to revolve around the eradication of poverty, so then you can apply from the World Bank for loans. Then there is also this International Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, where its member countries, the 35 of which belongs to the upper developed countries, and here the Organization of petroleum exporting countries. From the title itself is what this is organized in the 60s with Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Kuwait, Iran, Venezuela as their main oil distributor and member. So presently it has UAE, Algeria, Libya, Qatar, Niger, and Indonesia as also included as members. So the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries is a very powerful organization as it includes all these powerful uh, highly oil exporting countries. So we can all at least imagine the power of oil in terms of the dictating economy prices. So if suddenly they decide to cut the supply of oil or raise the price of oil, so it will be hard to um, tell them otherwise. Then this other significant important international organization is the European Union. Also includes member of 28 members from all highly important influential developed countries like Great Britain, Sweden, and Denmark. So the North American Free Trade Agreement is a free trade agreement originally by America and Canada for their trade relationships with each other. So they agreed that majority of their trade relations, it's like a partnership with each other. So later on, Mexico become part of the agreement. So it's a three-way agreement between United States, Mexico, and Canada for their trade relations with each other. So their main purpose is to develop and expand world trade by broadening their international cooperation with each other. So improving working conditions in the North America, reducing barriers. So here it resulted in the lowered prices by removing tariffs, opened new opportunities for small and medium-sized business to establish a name for itself. It have quadrupled the trade relationships between the three countries. It created 5 million US jobs. So it is a very positive partnership as an international organizations between the three countries. Even Canada has 76% of their exports and jobs dependent on the United States. So the negative impact of this is excessive pollution. Lots of more than 680,000 manufacturing jobs have been lost. Exploitation of workers in Mexico. So although they have been provided work, so some of them have been exploited. Moving of Mexican farmers out of business. So these Mexican farmers have been moved out of business by transferring to production to manufacturing sector. So the agricultural side have took a negative. So history of the global market integration. The understanding of the evolution of global modern economy want us to go back in time. So 12,000 years ago, where it all began. So before that, from the basic ways of living on how to shift in order to produce, distribute, and exchange product and services. So before we have been disintegrated and interdependent with each other, before we started in the agricultural revolution, where man first learned how to domesticate plants and animals. So before we were nomads and travel from place to place, and in this agricultural sector first we learned how to domestic plants and animals, and because of this we have realized that it was very more productive than our previous hunter and gatherer style. So this allowed us to be a new agricultural economy. So farming helps societies build surplus. So meaning there is already surplus in your produce. So you cannot be trapped in doing the same thing every day. So there is already surplus, meaning not everyone have to spend their time producing food. So you can have time to do something else. So this in turn led to major developments like permanent settlements, trade network, and population growth. So people have begun to settle, and not like before every day's objective is looking for food. So to be able to be more efficient and effective and realize that we cannot produce everything that we need, so we, aside from having permanent settlements, we have developed trade networks with each other. So trade networks with those products and services that we need, and further resulted to population growth. So the second major economic revolution is the Industrial Revolution from the 1800s. So this gave rise to industry with new tools, steam engine. So this is our real breakthrough from the traditional agricultural methods that we know. So manufacturing and production has been available. So to be able to mass produce a particular product because of machines. Suddenly factories pop up and change how work function, from wage worker to becoming specialized skilled worker. So productivity went up, standard of living rose, and people had access to wider variety of goods due to mass production. So these have changed many things because of this economic industrial revolution. So suddenly we are not anymore farmers. We have become industrial workers and have many industrial innovations and technologies because of the discovery of steam engines, transportations, and even other technologies. But still there are negative effects. So workers were mainly poor women and children. So they are paid with very low wages. There is a gap in economic inequality. So because of this, the labor union was formed. So when one cannot fight against the owner of the capital or the building or the resource, the labor union collectively can fight. So this is an organization of workers sought to improve wages or better working conditions through collective actions, strikes, and negotiations. So collective meaning as a whole, they have these through collective actions, strikes, negotiation with management. So they ask for better payment and working conditions. So labor union gave way for minimum wage laws for the workers, then the reasonable working hours for 8 hours a day, regulations for safety of the workers in the working environment, that they should not work in a very hazardous and dangerous working environment. So this was the fruit of the labor union's effort. Capitalism and socialism are also ideas that come out during this industrial period. Capitalism is a system in which all natural resources and means of productions are privately owned. So the private capital by an individual. All the all the productions are owned by a private individual. So that is capitalism. As opposed to socialism, all the means of production are under collective ownership or by the government. So socialism is the opposite of is somewhat like the opposite of capitalism. So it rejects capitalism private property and hands-off approach. Property is owned by the government and allocated to all citizens. So when in capitalism there is a rich powerful owner of the particular manufacturing business, while in socialism, the government owns the particular machinery and business and allocate all of the goods to its citizens. So, socialism emphasizes equality. All members of the society are socially equal. So, that is the concept of capitalism and socialism. Whereas now, our current age, ours is the time of the information revolution. So, from human labor to technology, manufacturing based economy to one that is based on service and the production of ideas rather than goods. So, we have now a different age as compared to the agricultural and industrial period. We are currently on information revolution. So that's why many workers are now offering services instead of goods. Some offer their consultative services like lawyers, doctors, teachers, consultants, agents. Many offer services rather than goods. So computers and other technologies are beginning to replace many jobs because of automation. So it is already high tech. The AI have already attained an advancement. So other jobs are being replaced because of automation or outsourcing jobs offshore. So, what's next? Nowadays, a key part of both our economic and political landscape is corporations. So, corporations are defined as organizations that exist as legal entities and have liabilities that are separate from its members. So, they are their own thing, operating across national boundaries and will play out a global scale. So, corporations have a juridical separate entity. So, it's like it has an own distinct and separate existence from its stockholders. So it can be sued and be sued it can sue and be sued at its own with its own name. So it is a particular juridical entity separate from us. So this third part is already the global governance. So seems we have not really reached this part yet. We will not include this in many of the most of the topics will not include only the important parts. So I've only included uh, little or basic concepts here, like the concept of sovereignty of government. So the government has the right to uh, government in its constituents. So internationalization erodes the sovereignty of states. So sovereignty is the authority of the government to be responsible or enact laws to all its constituents. So it is the power of the government to set their own policies, adhere their own laws, punish their own crimes. So this is the sovereignty of the states. That's why when President Rodrigo Duterte uh, are being suspected of possible violations of human rights violations, it says that you won't accept trial into the international tribunal but wants to be decided in our own courts because of our sovereignty. So international organizations erodes our concept of sovereignty because these international organizations, like what the UN wants, when it sees that a particular country is somehow, like in our previous case, they suspected us of violating certain human rights, then it seeks to intervene into our policies and to our country. It even tried to determine the innocence of our president to be tried in their court of tribunal. So it is like undermining the authority of our country. So upgrade our economy given the strength of the global economy and resolve issues like poverty and unemployment. So our economy will be upgraded through its strength. Our strength, the strength of our economy is through agriculture. So if we want to upgrade our main strength, so we must focus on that part of our economy when we can have a comparable advantage. We have very many abundant natural resources, so we have to focus on it if we want to grow an economy and resolve issues like poverty and unemployment. So the introduction of global governments is from this. It shows the many problems happening in various parts of the world. In here, terrorism, the proliferation of the nuclear war weapon. So it shows here the various threats, the natural disasters happening in the different countries. So this needs various help from the international organizations for this country to recover economically or its people to survive. So many people are suffering from hunger. So 20,000 children in Africa have already perished. So this needs assistance from the various international organizations like the UN. So there are calamities, that extreme flooding that are experienced, like in your example, the flooding in Southeast Asia. So many provinces are affected, many people died, and many properties are damaged. Humanitarian crisis. So in here the example is the humanitarian crisis in Syria, where it has 300,000 estimated death toll and 1.2 million refugees to other countries. So this area of humanitarian countries that can be helped by the international organizations. So global governance, it is a movement towards political cooperation among transnational actors aimed at negotiating response to problems affect more than one state or region. So sometimes there are problems that affect not only one country but affected more countries. So it affects more state, more regions. So it cannot be handled by only one country like the Philippines and alone acting independently. So this requires political cooperation among different countries, among different actors. Like in those previously shown slides, those different issues, different catastrophes, different calamities, so they cannot be settled by one country alone. It needed political cooperations by different countries. Only to their joint efforts and cooperations that it can be resolved. So there is no world government to coordinate and facilitate cooperation among all actors to deal with threats and challenges. So unlike our country, there is a government to deal with all those problems and threats. So there is no such world government. That's why it is needed a global governance between these international organizations. It is like a political cooperation. Although there is no established government, it is a political cooperation between different countries agreeing to be a member of those agreements. So the United Nations, International Criminal Court, the World Bank are examples of institutions of global governance. So although they are private, the United Nations, International Criminal Court, World Bank, they are example of institutions of global governance. So global governance can be roughly divided into four stages: agenda setting, policy making, implementation, evaluation. So their main objective is equal rights for all the countries, implying the institution of a global redistribution process. Eradication of poverty in all countries, so it's similar to what's been previously discussed of the 8 millennial goals of the UN. So it is also emphasized here the eradication of poverty in all countries. Sustainable development on a global scale as an absolute imperative in political action at all levels. So sustainable development of the environment. Fight against the roots of terrorism and crime. So as a whole, they will fight the roots of terrorism and crime because it is a threat for humanity. Consistent, effective, and fully democratic international institutions. Global democracy must guarantee that global public goods are equitably accessible to all citizens of the world. So these are sources of international law. There are 5 sources of international law. So treaties signed by different countries, conventions, or customary practices. So the writings of legal scholars, judicial decisions, and general principles of law. So international norms or soft laws, although not a binding legal document, but rather the standard of behavior such as some form of human rights. So here the example is the human rights. Although there is no legally binding document, so it is like a standard of behavior. Labor rights, framework conventions on climate change and biodiversity. So the UN have these policies. So it is a matter of soft law. So like the human rights, although there was no intended penalty for such a violation, and labor rights, so it is a matter of policy that recommendatory policy from the United Nations that the other countries will adhere because of their membership to practice or encourage the equal rights and treatment towards the no discrimination on the parts of the sexes. So international organizations, United Nations, World Trade Organization, World Health Organization. And then these the non-governmental organizations. So there are other non-governmental or organization that have their separate advocates. So they have an international dimension either in terms of membership or commitment to conduct activities. So their advocates a particular cause such as human rights, peace, environment protection. So because of their international dimension or international membership, they have this respect and somehow implied authority, providing services such as disaster relief and humanitarian aid. Global conference, so it is also respected and parang a source of power din. So because of this summit for children in 1990 in New York, reworked some of the rights of children are further emphasized. So why do we need global governance? So global governance is needed to cooperate and facilitate international efforts to address common threats and challenges. So because we cannot face our own problems or threats and challenges alone, we need this global governance and cooperations between these different countries. So we voluntarily adhere and member ourselves to the international organizations so that they can also provide aids and help common threats and challenges, address challenges to us. So we cannot self-sustain to ourselves, our poverty, our needs to protect ourselves against threats and challenges. So we adhere to the international support of global governance from like the UN, international organizations. So the state has traditionally been the subject of most interest to scholars of global politics because it is viewed as the institution that creates warfare and set economic policies for a country. So these are the qualities of a state. So the state like this are Philippines. So the Philippines has a right to self-determination. So it is our right of our country that no other state should not intervene in its affairs unless extraordinary reasons to do so. So they have no rights to intervene about our personal affairs unless for extreme reasons. So recognitions of our sovereign right to govern our own territorial borders. That's why the Philippines has our borders, and if other country will cross its borders, then they will be liable for such. Like in our sea, we have a territorial sea, territorial waters, that there are certain limits, and where other countries like China can fish or do their economic activities. So it is our right to practice our international borders. So autonomous in itself and responsible for within its own system of government. We cannot be dictated on how we our current form of government. No other like countries can dictate that our government is better. So we have the right to and authority to do our own system of government. So conflict within must be solved and solution must be done through the institution of government established and codified, whether or not through election. So we have our own manner and resolution of resolving our issues. The state provide leadership, our leadership through our president. Policies are developed and implemented in the interest of the people. Civil society is the counterweight of the government, so that's why it is a government by the people for the people. So the real power lies in the people. Civil society includes the private economy, educational institution, churches, hospital. State is a different entity. So there are traditional challenges to a government in its autonomy. Autonomy meaning the right and authority to practice its own laws and personal policies. It is our autonomy, our freedom, and our right. So state autonomy. There are traditional challenges. So external intervention can generally describe as an invasion by other countries. These days it can be seen in other forms. So there are external interventions from other countries. So like if other countries from America or China will intervene in our policy making or certain manners on how we do, so it can be deemed as an intervention of the autonomy of the state. Internal policy challenges, regional organization challenging state autonomy. Challenges from the national or identity movements. The importance of cultural identity that people attach to nationalism challenges the traditional notion of state sovereign. Global movements, the structure fundamentalists around the version of Islam. Global economics, the states are demanded to conform to the rules of free market capitalism. So neoliberal economics and neoliberal capitalism focus on free trade and dismantling barriers. Free trade as an ideal or normative belief. So this is also an example of undermining the state authority, because although we want to close our ports and not practice free trade, because of this global economics we are forced to open our ports. So they demand for free market capitalism. So even if we don't want to, we want to close and our doors and protect our local domestic product. Because of this global economics, we are forced to adhere to the forces of economic capitalism. So it is a form of undermining our authority and power. Neoliberal economics requires the state to cooperate in the global market through the free flow of capital, the privatization of services, and the fiscal authority or consignment. Global social movements. Movements of people are spontaneous or that emerge through enormous grassroots organizations. Social movements are transnational, which occurs across countries and across borders, states having less control over them. Environmental movement is another related to public policy. The case of Lakida or state, where social movements emerge in local areas, fight back as response to the controlling efforts by the apparatus of government to protect the interests of liberal capitalists. The biggest conflict in the global social movement is the conflict between the West and fundamental Islam over the role of women in society, as well as women's autonomy. So rights to personal autonomy such as homosexuality, same-sex marriage, and gender equality. The role of the United Nations and International Criminal Court, the role of non-governmental organizations like Doctors Without Borders or Amnesty International, and the role of global media are increasingly becoming bigger roles. So there are conflicts in various in like the conflict between the fundamentalist Islam and the West, and the role of women in society, as well as the women's autonomy. So there are certain influence internationally, they come as in conflict with the usual customs of a particular society. So these social movements somehow there undermines the usual authority of a particular country. So when a particular country, before the women would realize and accept their role because of what they see through media and what is being internationally praised or accepted, then somehow the usual power and authority of that previous Middle East country would now be questioned. So, like in this example, some Middle Eastern women could now protest on their rights of equality, unlike before. So, some parts, so these parts on global governance have already not been included in our finals. So, most of the discussions are only on most of the coverage included in the finals or was only on the economic part. There was only one question related to global governance is on that part of sovereignty, on how it affected the independence of the sovereignty of the government through this effect of internationalization. So the international effect of the independence of sovereignty towards our government. So although it didn't totally lose our sovereignty, but a little, it resulted to undermine a little of authority and independence of our government, because although mandatory because of the needed help in combating similar problems or similar situations or the possibility of future aid, so we resort to voluntarily undermining our authority and possible compromise our our rights and authority. So I guess that would be okay. That would be all. If you want to further read, you can still read the succeeding slides. So in here, it is the component of the elements of a state. So people, territory, government, sovereignty. It is just very easy. It is just the element of a state. No state can survive without people, without territory, without a particular government or sovereignty. So all these concepts must exist. So sovereignty is that autonomy from other states. So that is the definition of sovereignty. You have an autonomy from all other states. So internal and external sovereignty. So autonomy is synonymous with independence. Independence from other states. No other states has the right to intervene in your internal affairs. So it cannot intervene on how you regulate your relation among your people and with other states. Concept of nation state. So these are also other international organizations that govern the manner of internal relations. So here it is also mentioned NAFTA, the Northern American Free Trade Agreement between America, Canada, and Mexico. So peace treaties and military alliances, the UN and the NATO. So the United Nations is one of the leading political organizations in the world where nation state meets and deliberate. The United Nations was coined by US President Roosevelt So, generally, the function of the UN is with four areas: military issues, economic issues, environmental issues, and human protection. So, the UN is made up of closely to 200 countries from around the world. So, as of 2011, 193 members to be exact. So the general headquarters of the UN is in New York, and it has constant General Assembly in gathering all their countries. So the constant assembly or meeting from representatives from various countries. So its main purpose is to maintaining peace and security became the central mission of the UN. So it was always working to prevent conflict between the states, like the case of Russia and Ukraine, helping parties in conflict to make peacekeeping, creating the conditions to allow peace and flourish. Also, in the economic issues, the Sustainable Development Goals. Environmental issues such as pollution and hazardous waste materials. So these have all been taken account to, and the International Court of Justice refers to as the World's Court, located in Netherlands Hague. This is where countries settle their dispute, where war criminals and rulers have done terrible things to their people can be brought to trial for their crimes, and other courts such as International Criminal Court and the International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea. So these are the international courts that settle the certain conflicts internationally between countries. So the Security Council is composed of the United States, Britain, Russia, China, and France. So these are the powerful member countries that are in charge of the security. So imagine the composition of this Security Council. They are the highly developed countries, and the decision of these developed countries somehow very much have that bigger weight as opposed to us and other developing countries. 10 additional countries join the permanent members for 2 years term. So they can pass sanctions, can send troops or observers. Worst scenario, they can use military force. So they have this power, and members have veto power. So UNICEF is another internal organization under the UN. So its primary goal is to help children around the world. So there are also non-governmental organizations that have influence politically in their international influence, like the Red Cross, Red Crescent in Muslim countries, a non-government organization, and is not tied to any country. So it monitors the treatment of prisoners of war and to conflicts to make sure that no war crimes are taking place. So global economic associations include the World Trade Organizations and the NAFTA. So global citizenship is associated with rights and obligations. The right to vote and the obligation to pay taxes has to do with the attitude willing to spend and time effort to the community. So we are citizens of the Philippines. So as citizens of the Philippines, we have the right to vote and obligation to pay taxes. So if ever the global citizenship is, if ever it is still a dream kind of citizen whereby different countries and communities would come under one rule. So define global citizen as a more ethical disposition that can guide understanding of individuals or group of local and global context and remind them of the relative responsibilities in various communities. Global citizens might be the new type of people that can travel within these various boundaries and somehow still make sense of the world. Trade protectionism and fair trade have already been discussed. So we have finally reached the end of the document. So although the last parts we didn't really discuss thoroughly, so the important parts that are included in our finals is on the economic portion of our topic for the finals. So thank you. Hope you can answer properly and hope you can retain some topics and understand some of our topics for contemporary world and globalization. So thank you. For the sake of his sorrow,